Okay, so you want to own a self-storage facility. Buy a patch of land somewhere off a highway, pour some concrete, bolt a couple hundred steel doors to it, and just watch the rent roll in every month. No tenants to manage, no toilets to fix, no phone calls at 2 in the morning. Just people you never see paying you for empty rooms they rarely visit. Sounds simple. And here is the part that sounds wrong. Concrete boxes with padlocks have outperformed the S&P 500 over the past 25 years, one of the highest returning segments in all of commercial real estate, and the entire product is an empty room with a roll-up door. But the people who lose everything in this business all lose it the exact same way. They look at the concrete and think the concrete is what they are selling. It is not. And what you discover behind every padlock door in the country changes what you think this business is actually selling. Before you collect a single dollar of rent, you need to survive building the thing. A competitive self-storage facility, climate-controlled, security-gated, camera-monitored, with a digital access system and enough curb appeal to look trustworthy. From the road costs between $4 and $6 million to build from scratch. The land alone, if you want visibility on a commercial corridor near a growing suburb, can run $500,000 to $1.5 million to $1.5 million depending on the market. Then comes the concrete, the steel roll-up doors, the fire suppression system, the drainage, the fencing, the landscaping, and the permits. By the time your date opens for the first time, you have spent more than the price of a small apartment complex on a building with no kitchens, no bathrooms, and no climate control in most of its units. Buying an existing facility is usually cheaper up front, but that is where the gap in this industry becomes visible. Not all storage is the same storage. A-Class A facility, climate-controlled, well-lit, located in a growing suburb where household incomes run above $100,000 a year, can charge $150 to $200 a month for a 10 by 10 unit. It has online booking, automatic payments, and in some markets, a waiting list. A-Class C facility, rusted roll-up doors on a gravel lot off a rural highway with a saw padlock and a hand-painted sign, might get $50 for the same square footage. The gap between those two is not a gentle gradient. It is the difference between a high-yield investment property and a building that barely covers its own insurance. And here is what almost nobody considers on the day they decide to enter this business. The competition you are walking into is not a collection of local operators figuring it out as they go. The three largest self-storage REITs in the United States, real estate investment trusts, publicly traded companies that own and operate income-producing property at massive scale, are Public Storage, Extra Space Storage, and CubeSmart. Between them, they control over 5,500 facilities. Public Storage alone carries a market capitalization above $50 billion. These companies do not price units the way you would price units. They run revenue management systems built by teams of data scientists, adjusting the rate on every single unit multiple times per day based on local demand, competitor pricing, seasonal trends, and signals you will never have access to. You are entering a market with a yard sign and a spreadsheet. They are entering the same market with a pricing engine that never sleeps. None of that means the business cannot work. It means the version that actually works is far more specific and far more fragile than the version most people imagine when they first hear the margins. You open the date on day 1. 15 of your 500 units are rented, most of them friends and family at discounted rates. Your monthly mortgage payment is $28,000. Your total revenue for the month is $1,800. The building is 97% empty. The debt is 100% full. The industry has a name for this phase. They call it the fill-up period. It typically lasts 2 to 3 years. During that window, you are burning cash every single month, watching the occupancy number climb one new rental at a time, and hoping the local market holds long enough for the revenue to catch up to the debt. Most of the operators who fail in self-storage fail right here, not because the business model is broken, but because the math does not wait for the building to fill. And what nobody mentions in the pitch is that even when the building does fill, what fills it is not always what you expect. The fill-up period is a slow grind, month by month, unit by unit. Year 1, you might hit 40% occupancy. Year 2, if the location is right and the marketing is steady, 65%. By year 3, you cross 80% and something shifts. The mortgage payment that felt like a weight on your chest starts to feel manageable. The break-even point for most facilities sits somewhere around 60 to 65% occupancy. Everything above that line is profit. Everything below it is a bill you owe regardless of whether anyone walks through the gate. But the real profit engine in self-storage is not the rate you advertise on your website. It is the rate you charge 6 months after someone moves in. The industry calls them existing customer rate increases, or ECRIS. Here is how they work. A new tenant signs a lease for a 10 by 10 unit at $120 a month. 6 months later, you raise the rate to $135. A year after that, $150. The tenant does not leave. They absorb the increase. Not because the price is fair and not because they failed to notice. They absorb it because the alternative, renting a truck, spending a Saturday hauling boxes, sorting through years of accumulated belongings they have been deliberately avoiding, is more painful than the extra $15 a month. Moving out of a storage unit is not a financial decision. It is an emotional one. And most people choose to keep writing the check rather than open the door and face what is behind it. This creates what the industry calls a sticky customer. The average self-storage tenant stays 14 to 15 months. But the profitable ones, the ones who drive the real economics of the business, stay 3, 4, 5 years, paying steadily escalating rates the entire time. Some tenants have been in the same unit for over a decade, quietly paying double or triple what they originally signed for. They are not staying because they need the storage. They are staying because the cost of confronting what is inside the unit is higher than the cost of ignoring it. Now, layer on the rest. Auto-pay enrollment, which reduces churn and eliminates late payment friction. Late fees themselves, which generate revenue from the tenants most likely to eventually default. Tenant insurance requirements, sold at the counter or during online checkout, adding $8 to $15 per month per unit. Administrative fees charged at move-in. Add it all together, and a mature, well-managed facility running at 88% occupancy can produce operating margins above 60%. 60% margins. In commercial real estate, on a concrete box with a padlock, this is the number that changed the industry. This is the number that made developers, private equity funds, and weekend real estate investors across the country look at self-storage and think the exact same thought. I should build one of those. And that single thought, repeated 10,000 times across every growing metro area in the country, is the thing that quietly turns a cash-flowing business into an arms race because the margins are real, the barriers are low, the concrete is easy to pour, and every other investor in the country is reading the same spreadsheet you are. The same number that makes you rich is the number that eventually floods the market. You just do not see it yet. One facility works. The numbers are clean, the debt is servicing, the occupancy is stable. So you do what every operator in this business eventually does. You start looking for the second one. Maybe you build from scratch on a new site across town. Maybe you find an existing facility with below-market rents and plan to raise them using the same ECRI playbook that worked the first time. Either way, the structure is the same. You take the equity in your first property and leverage it to finance the next. Your banker calls it growth. The SBA calls it a qualifying expansion. What it actually is, in plain terms, is compounding your exposure to a market you have only ever seen from the winning side. One facility, you can run yourself. You walk the property every morning, check the gate logs, handle the marketing, adjust the rates by hand. You know which units leak in heavy rain. You know which tenants are 3 days late every month but always pay. 2 facilities, and you need a site manager, someone to cover the second location at $35,000 to $45,000 a year plus benefits. 3 facilities, and the operation changes shape entirely. You need a small regional team, a revenue management platform that costs $800 to $2,000 a month, standardized operating procedures, a payroll service, and someone to answer the phone when a tenant at property 2 has a gate issue while you are dealing with a roof leak at property 3. The operating margin that looked like 60% at a single well-run facility starts compressing somewhere around property number 3. Not because revenue dropped, but because the infrastructure required to hold multiple locations together eats into it from below. Software subscriptions, regional management salaries, accounting, legal compliance across multiple jurisdictions, vehicle costs for a manager who now drives between sites, these are real line items, and they arrive on schedule whether the third facility fills on time or not. Here is where it gets interesting. The moment your second or third facility starts showing up in the competitive data that REITs track, you become visible. Public storage, extra space storage, CubeSmart, these companies do not just operate self-storage, they acquire it. Their entire growth strategy depends on identifying independent operators who have built something profitable and then absorbing those properties into a portfolio with lower cost of capital, better pricing tools, and a national brand that ranks above you on every search engine in the country. You are not growing into an empire. You are growing into a target. The offer comes quietly. A commercial real estate broker calls with a number. The REIT will buy your 3 facilities at a cap rate that sounds generous on the surface, until you realize they have already priced in the rate increases you have not made yet, the deferred maintenance you have been postponing to keep cash flow looking clean, and the property tax reassessment that will hit the county records the day the deed transfers. The number on the term sheet is not the number that lands in your account. It never is. You can say no, keep building. But now you are competing directly against the same company that just offered to buy you, and they are financing their next facility at a rate roughly half of what your bank charges. Their marketing budget for a single metro area is larger than your total annual revenue. Their pricing algorithm adjusts faster than you can open your spreadsheet. The math has not changed. The opponent has. Now here is the part that catches people regardless of which side of that decision they land on. Whether you sell or stay, there is a layer of costs in this business that almost never shows up in the pitch decks, the YouTube videos, or the online investment forums. These are the expenses that arrive after you have already committed your capital, and they arrive with the quiet certainty of a tax bill because in many cases, that is exactly what they are. The first one hits every time a facility changes hands, and in a business where operators grow by acquiring existing properties, that means it hits often. In most jurisdictions across the United States, when a commercial property is sold, the county reassesses its value at or near the sale price. A facility that was sitting on the tax rolls at an assessed value of $2 million gets purchased for $5.5 million. 6 months later, the new tax assessment arrives. The annual property tax bill jumps from $22,000 to over $60,000. That is not a marginal adjustment. That is a line item large enough to turn a profitable facility into a break-even operation overnight. And it catches a staggering number of first-time buyers completely off guard because the previous owner's tax bill, the one that appeared in the due diligence, package was based on a valuation that no longer exists the moment you sign the deed. The second cost hides behind every padlocked door in the building, and it is one that most operators prefer not to think about until they have no choice. Self-storage rental agreements give the operator no legal right to inspect a unit's contents without cause. You hand over a key, collect a payment, and trust that the person on the other side of the door is storing household furniture and seasonal decorations. Some of them are storing hazardous chemicals, perishable food that rots and attracts pests, firearms that may or may not be legally owned, stolen merchandise, and in rare but well-documented cases, materials that create genuine environmental contamination in the soil beneath the building's foundation. Your commercial insurance policy covers standard operations. It does not cover an EPA remediation order because a tenant in Unit 247 was Brisa. 50-gallon drums of industrial solvent for 3 years without anyone knowing. That kind of bill starts in the 6 figures and climbs from there. The third cost is the one that grinds. Customer acquisition. The single largest variable expense for most independent self-storage operators is not maintenance or staffing, it is marketing. A single click on a Google ad for the search term self-storage near me costs between $8 and $15 in competitive metro areas. The REITs dominate the top positions on every search results page because they can afford to lose money on initial customer acquisition, knowing that the lifetime value of a sticky tenant, those escalating monthly payments compounding over 3 to 5 years, will cover the upfront loss many times over. An independent operator spending $3,000 a month on digital advertising is bidding against companies that spend $3 million. The math is not close. The costs you planned for the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, the part-time site manager, those are the ones that show up in the pro forma on page 1. They are predictable. The costs that actually change the trajectory of the business, the reassessment, the liability behind the doors, the marketing arms race, are the ones that arrive later, quietly, after the capital is deployed, and they change the math while you are still running the old numbers. Every one of those hidden costs is survivable as long as the revenue holds. The problem is that the revenue does not always hold. And the reason it stops holding is the exact same characteristic that made the business look so attractive in the first place. Self-storage is simple to build: concrete, steel, a gate. The permitting is straightforward compared to residential or mixed-use development. The timeline from breaking ground to opening day can be as short as 12 to 18 months. And when an asset class produces operating margins above 60% with a product that requires no specialized labor to maintain, the barriers to entry do not hold for long. Every developer with access to capital and a parcel of land near a highway exit eventually runs the same math you ran. And when enough of them act on it at the same time, the result is entirely predictable. Between 2015 and 2020, new self-storage construction surged across the United States. Developers who had never touched a storage facility before broke ground in every fast-growing Sunbelt metro: Dallas, Phoenix, Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, Austin, Tampa. In some submarkets, new supply increased by 15 to 25% in a span of 3 years. Demand did not grow anywhere close to that rate. The country had roughly 53,000 self-storage facilities before the construction surge began. By the time it leveled off, thousands more had been added, and many of them were competing for the same tenant pool within the same 5-mile radius. Here is what oversaturation looks like from the inside of an operating facility. You are running at 87% occupancy. Rates are healthy. Cash flow is stable. Your second facility is starting to perform. Then a brand new, climate-controlled facility opens less than a mile away. Grand opening. First month free. Half off for 3 months. Online booking with instant gate access. The kind of promotional campaign only a well-capitalized developer can afford to run at a loss for an entire year. Your phone slows down. Your website traffic drops. Move-ins that used to come in at 4 or 5 per week fall to 2. Then 1. Your occupancy slides to 78%, then 72. You did not change anything about your operation. The market changed around you. You try to compete. You lower your street rate. You offer your own promotions. You match the competitors' move-in specials and hope the new tenants stick around long enough to become profitable. Some of them do. Most of them signed up because of the discount, and they leave the moment a better one appears down the road. Your revenue per unit drops. Your operating margin compresses, but your mortgage payment does not compress. Your property tax does not compress. Your insurance premium does not compress. The break-even point that used to sit comfortably at 63% occupancy is now the number you are fighting every single month just to stay above. The same math that made the business feel effortless at 87% is the same math that threatens to bury you at 72. And here's the part that makes oversaturation in self-storage different from almost every other competitive threat in commercial real estate. Concrete boxes, once built, do not go away. They do not downsize. They do not relocate. They do not close for the season. They sit there, with their signs lit and their gates open, pulling tenants from every facility within a 5-mile radius, including yours, for decades. When oversaturation squeezes margins and the competition grinds into your revenue, operators in this industry comfort themselves with a line that has been repeated so many times it has become almost sacred. Self-storage is recession-proof. The logic sounds airtight. When the economy contracts, people lose homes, downsize apartments, go through divorces, move in with family. All of those transitions generate belongings that need to go somewhere. Demand for storage, the argument goes, actually increases during economic hardship. And for a while, the data backed it up. During the 2008 financial crisis, self-storage occupancy held steadier than almost every other commercial real estate class in the country. Office vacancies climbed. Retail collapsed. Hotels bled revenue. Self-storage, by and large, held its line. But the part of the story that rarely gets told is what kind of tenants walked through the gate during those years. They were not homeowners storing furniture between a sale and a purchase. They were people in financial crisis. Families who had lost a house and moved into a smaller apartment with no garage. Individuals going through a divorce with nowhere to put the second half of a household. People who could not afford to keep paying for what they owned but could not bring themselves to throw it all away, either. They needed storage the way you need a life raft urgently, desperately, and with no plan for what comes next. These were not the sticky customers who stay for years and quietly absorb rate increases. These were people who needed storage for 3 months and could only afford 2. People in financial crisis do not always keep paying. Some of them stop after 2 months, some after 6. Some simply vanish, change their phone number, move to a different state, and never come back for their belongings. The unit sits there, generating no revenue, protected by a padlock that now belongs to someone who no longer exists at the address on file. When a tenant stops paying, the process that follows is governed by state lien law, and it is nothing like the version that appeared on television. The operator waits 30 to 90 days, depending on the state, sends certified letters to the tenant's last known address, and then cuts the lock. You inventory everything inside. You photograph it. You advertise the auction, sometimes online, sometimes in a local newspaper. A handful of buyers show up. They look through what amounts to the material debris of someone's worst-year particle board furniture, damp cardboard boxes, children's toys, bags of clothing that smell like mildew. The average auction recovery is a small fraction of the total unpaid rent. In many cases, the winning bid does not even cover the cost of the certified mail you sent. A lien sale is not a revenue center. It is a loss mitigation process dressed up in the language of commerce, and the cost does not end with the auction. Between the tenant's last payment and the day the unit is relisted, the unit generates zero revenue. After the auction, you pay a hauling company to remove whatever did not sell, which is most of it. You clean the unit, repair any damage, repaint if necessary, and relist it at whatever the current market rate supports, which in a softening market may be less than what the defaulting tenant was paying before they stopped. The unit sat idle for 3 to 6 months. You spent money at every step along the way. The concrete box earned nothing, the same characteristic that made self-storage look recession-proof. People need to, quote, store their things during a crisis is also what makes abandonment so predictable. People do not abandon luxuries. They abandon the necessities they can no longer afford to keep. And when they walk away, the operator is left holding a padlock, a pile of someone else's life, and a unit that needs to start earning all over again. For the independent operator who survives the fill-up period, the oversaturation, the hidden cost layers, and the downturn cycles, there is one more force pressing against the business. This one does not come from the market. It comes from the buyers. The institutional consolidation of the self-storage industry has been accelerating for over a decade, and it shows no signs of slowing down. In 2010, the 5 largest storage operators in the United States controlled roughly 15% of the country's total supply. By 2023, that share had nearly doubled. The acquisitions did not pause during the pandemic, they accelerated. Extra Space Storage merged with Life Storage in a deal valued at $12.4 billion. Public Storage launched multiple unsolicited bids for competitors. National Storage affiliates and other mid-tier REITs went on buying sprees in secondary markets that smaller operators had assumed were too small to attract institutional attention. The biggest players in this industry are not growing by building new facilities. They are growing by buying their competition, one operator at a time. To understand what that consolidation looks like on the ground, consider what happened in markets like San Antonio and parts of Greater Orlando between 2018 and 2022. Independent operators who had built profitable facilities during the mid-2010s boom watched as REITs entered their submarkets, undercut their pricing, and then circled back with acquisition offers at suppressed valuations. The pattern repeated across dozens of Sunbelt metros, and it almost always followed the same sequence. A REIT acquires or builds a facility 2 miles from your best-performing location. They undercut your street rate by 20%. They can afford the short-term loss because they are absorbing it across a portfolio of over 2,000 properties in 38 states. Their national SEO operation pushes their listing above yours on every Google search. Their brand name carries recognition that your local signage does not. Your website traffic drops. Your phone slows down. Your occupancy at that location slides from 85% to 74% over the course of 12 months. Your revenue falls. Your property value follows it down, because self-storage properties are valued as a direct function of the cash flow they produce. Less cash flow, lower value. Then the call comes. A commercial real estate broker representing the same REIT that has been competing against you for the past year reaches out with an offer. They want to buy all 3 of your facilities. The price is based on your current net operating income, the income they suppressed by entering your market and undercutting your rates. You built those 3 facilities over 7 years. The total development cost was $5 million. They are offering $3.8 million. Your outstanding mortgage balance across all 3 properties is $3.6 million. 7 years of work, 3 facilities, $200,000 in equity. The only buyer willing to pay that number is the company that made it worth that little. And if you say no, you go back to competing against them tomorrow morning with the same cost disadvantage, the same search ranking disadvantage, and the same brand disadvantage you had yesterday. Except now, your occupancy is lower, your revenue is thinner, and your lender is starting to ask questions about your debt service coverage ratio. The small operator did not fail because the business was bad. The business was good. That is exactly why the institutions wanted it. The empire was not outcompeted. It was not mismanaged. It was absorbed. And the concrete box you poured the foundation for, the one you walked every morning for 7 years and knew by the sound of every gate motor, is now painted in someone else's colors, running someone else's pricing algorithm, generating returns for someone else's shareholders. The operators who survive all of this, the fill-up grind, the hidden costs, the oversaturation, the downturns, and the consolidation wave do exist. But they share a few things in common that separate them from the operators who get squeezed out or absorbed. And those things are almost the exact opposite of what most people picture when they hear the phrase self-storage empire. They operate in secondary and tertiary markets where the REITs do not see enough return to justify a multi-million-dollar acquisition. Small towns in the Midwest. Exurban communities at the edge of growing metros where the nearest competitor is 15 or 20 miles down the highway. Rural corridors along interstate exits where the county population is too small for algorithmic pricing to care about. They keep their debt low, their facilities well maintained, and their operations personal. They know their tenants by name. They answer the phone on the second ring. They compete on trust and physical presence rather than on search engine rankings and dynamic pricing software. They are not building empires. They are building businesses, and in this industry, those are not the same thing. At the same time, the business itself is changing in ways that cut in both directions for these small operators. Automated kiosks are replacing front desk staff at an increasing pace. Unmanned facilities, no on-site employees at all, are becoming common in markets where labor costs make the traditional model unsustainable. Dynamic pricing software that was once exclusive to the largest REITs is now available through third-party platforms for a few $100s a month. A single owner can manage 5 or 10 facilities from a laptop without setting foot on any of them in a given week. This makes operations dramatically cheaper. It also makes the personal touch that small operators relied on, the handshake at the gate, the familiar face behind the counter, the reputation earned one conversation at a time, feel a little less necessary every year. The technology that levels the playing field is the same technology that erodes the advantage of being local. So does owning self-storage actually work as a business? The honest answer depends entirely on which version of the business you are running. And the gap between the good version and the bad version is enormous. The margins are real. The demand is real. 1 in 10 Americans currently rents a storage unit, and that number has been climbing steadily for decades. But the window between this is easy money and this is someone else's acquisition target is narrower than most people realize when they pour the first slab. The operators who build lasting businesses understood from the very beginning that they were not in the building business. They were in the timing business, entering the right market, at the right moment, with the right amount of debt, and the discipline to stay small when everything in the industry was screaming at them to grow. You look at a self-storage facility and you see concrete, steel doors, and a padlock. From the outside, it looks like the simplest building in all of real estate. From the inside, it is a container for the moments in people's lives when they have too much to keep and too much to throw away: divorce, death, downsizing, displacement, debt. Operators in the industry call them the 5Ds, the 5 life events that drive nearly all self-storage demand. None of them are happy occasions. You are not renting square footage. You are renting the gap between what someone's life used to be and what it is becoming. The concrete box was never the product. The crisis was. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video and comment, where are you watching from? Subscribe for more.